She watched her father die, lost her home, her name, and everything she loved. But she didn't break. She learned to kill. She learned to survive. And when death came for the world, Arya Stark was the one who killed it. She was never meant to be a hero. No prophecy, no crown, no destiny. She wasn't chosen by gods or dragons. She chose herself. This is Arya Stark, the girl who became death and then found life again. Winterfell's wild daughter. When King Robert rode north to offer her father, Eddard Stark, the position of Hand of the King, Arya saw her first glimpse of the southern world: polished armor, banners, laughter, lies hidden under gold. Her world shifted that day. She didn't know it, but the journey south would be the end of her childhood. In King's Landing, Arya's wild spirit clashed with the poison of the court. She trained secretly with Syrio Forel, the Brevosi first sword, who taught her the words that would become her creed: fear cuts deeper than swords. Under his guidance, the playful girl from Winterfell began to fade, replaced by someone sharper, someone who could survive. But even Syrio couldn't protect her from the storm that was coming. Arya Stark never fit the mold her world tried to force her into. While her sister Sansa dreamed of songs, silks, and princes, Arya dreamt of swords, maps, and adventure. From the very beginning, she rebelled against the life expected of a lady. Her father, Eddard Stark, saw in her the untamed spirit of the North, fierce, honest, and unbending. It was that wild spark that would one day become her greatest weapon. But childhood dreams end quickly in the Game of Thrones. The day her father was executed before her eyes, Arya's innocence was buried beneath the roar of the crowd. That moment forged her, not into a killer yet, but into something colder, sharper, something that would never again believe in safety. Every step she took after that was driven by a single promise whispered in the dark: the next time I see them, I'll be stronger. The Road of Shadows. Disguised as a boy, Arya fled King's Landing, clutching Needle, the sword Jon Snow had given her, the only piece of her family she had left. The road was cruel. Hunger, fear, and death became her companions. Yet even as she hid among commoners, prisoners, and soldiers, Arya's heart remained defiant. She became Ari, then Weasel, then Nan. Each name was a disguise, each one a layer of armor. But no matter what mask she wore, her eyes remained that of Stark, cold, fierce, and unyielding. It was during these dark wanderings that Arya learned the truth of the world her father had tried to shield her from, that honor could not survive in a world ruled by cruelty. She witnessed villages burned, friends murdered, and men hanged for sport. And with every horror she saw, she whispered names to herself, the names of those she would one day kill: Cersei Lannister, the Hound, Polliver, the Mountain. That list became her prayer, her mantra, her heartbeat. Arya had lost her family, her home, and her innocence, but she had gained purpose. The Road to Nowhere. After the fall of her family, Arya's life became a journey without a home. From King's Landing to the Riverlands, she wandered through war and death disguised as no one. She became a captive of the Lannisters, then a servant, then a fugitive again. Along the way, she met two figures who would define her transformation: Jaqen H'ghar and Sandor Clegane, the Hound. From Jaqen she learned the art of death. He gave her a coin and a phrase: Valar Morghulis, all men must die. From the Hound, she learned that monsters are sometimes more human than heroes. He was brutal, cruel, yet strangely honest. In him she saw the reflection of a truth she could no longer deny, that survival requires a kind of darkness. Every lesson she learned pulled her further from the child she once was. The more she killed, the less she wept. But somewhere beneath that coldness, a spark still burned, a yearning for home, for the faces she could never forget. By the time she reached Braavos, Arya Stark was no longer a lost girl. She was a blade seeking a purpose. The House of Black and White. Braavos was where Arya Stark truly died, and where no one was born. The House of Black and White stripped her of everything, her name, her identity, her very self. To become a faceless assassin, she had to let go of vengeance, of love, of every emotion that made her Arya. But that was the one lesson she could never accept. In trying to kill the girl from Winterfell, the Faceless Men only made her stronger. Every mask she wore reminded her of who she really was beneath them. Every identity she borrowed only deepened her connection to her true self. When she finally rejected Jaqen's path and claimed her name again, a girl is Arya Stark of Winterfell. It was not rebellion, it was rebirth. She didn't become no one. She became everyone she had to be to survive. The return of the wolf. When Arya returned to Westeros, she was not a daughter coming home. She was a storm returning to its origin. The North had always been her heart, but vengeance had become her pulse. She was not the wide-eyed child who once feared losing her father. Now she was the shadow in the hall, the blade in the dark. Walder Frey learned that too late. The Red Wedding had stolen her family. She repaid it with poetic justice, serving him the flesh of his sons before cutting his throat with the same calm precision of a god delivering judgment. It wasn't cruelty, it was balance. For every Stark buried, Arya returned the favor with silence. But vengeance has a cost. Every kill was a victory, and a piece of her humanity fading away. When she finally stood again in Winterfell, facing Sansa, the contrast between the two sisters showed how different roads can lead back to the same truth. The pack survives. Arya's heart, hardened by years of death, still beat for her family. The Knight and the Blade. When the dead came for the living, it wasn't a king, a dragon, or a prophecy that saved the world. It was Arya Stark. In the silence of the crypts, in the heart of the long night, she proved that legends are not born from prophecy, but from persistence. The Night King had faced warriors, dragons, and armies, but not a girl who had faced death so many times she no longer feared it. The moment she leapt through the darkness, knife in hand, and ended the long night with a single strike, it wasn't just a victory for life. It was the final transformation of Arya Stark, the girl who had once chased cats through the halls of Winterfell, into the woman who killed death itself. That strike symbolized her entire story, silent, swift, unexpected, and world-changing. Yet even heroes are haunted by their victories. After the wars were over, Arya did not sit on a throne or command armies. She was never meant to. The world she saved was not one she could live in. Too much blood had passed through her hands. Too many faces had been worn and forgotten. So she sailed west, not in exile, but in search of something that had always eluded her: peace. What lies beyond the maps, no one knows. But for Arya, it was never about finding glory. It was about finding herself again. Perhaps beyond the edge of the world, she would find a life that did not require her to kill, a life where she could finally just be. Or perhaps she would find more danger, more mystery, more of what she was always meant for, the unknown. Because Arya Stark was never made for stillness. She was made for motion, for the wind, for the hunt, for the endless horizon that always called her name. The meaning of a name. Names in Westeros carry power. They are banners, legacies, and weapons. But Arya's story was the slow unraveling of that power, the realization that identity cannot be inherited, it must be earned. While others were born into titles and fought to keep them, Arya spent her life shedding hers. She became Ari among the Night's Watch recruits, Weasel when she hid from Lannister soldiers, and No One in Braavos. Each name was a mask, each disguise a step away from the person she had been, yet every time the world tried to erase her, she came back sharper, colder, more certain of who she was. Her refusal to vanish entirely, to truly become no one, was her greatest rebellion. Because for Arya, identity was not a weakness to be abandoned, it was a weapon to be sharpened. Where Sansa learned to survive through diplomacy and deception, Arya survived through adaptation and endurance. She did not manipulate her enemies, she outlived them. Her strength wasn't found in power, but in persistence. That's what made her dangerous. That's what made her unforgettable. Even when the world stripped her name away, it could not strip away what the name meant. A girl has no name, they told her. But in truth, Arya Stark had every name she needed: sister, daughter, killer, savior, survivor. The shadow and the light. Arya's journey is, at its heart, a mirror, reflecting both the light and the darkness that lives within us. She is the embodiment of revenge and justice intertwined, two forces that often wear the same face. Her kills are both triumphs and tragedies. Every act of vengeance brings closure, but also deepens her detachment from the world. When she slit Walder Frey's throat, it wasn't just vengeance, it was restoration. The Red Wedding was finally answered. But the calm in her expression afterward, the quiet satisfaction without remorse, hinted at the cost of her transformation. She no longer killed in rage, she killed because she had learned how. That distinction separates Arya from every other Stark. Jon killed for honor, Sansa punished for justice, Arya killed for balance. She was never cruel, but she was never merciful either. She existed in the thin gray line between justice and shadow, a balance that few could understand and even fewer could live with. What made her journey truly human was her awareness of that darkness. She did not deny it, she carried it like a scar, not hidden, not flaunted, simply accepted. Arya understood what her world refused to admit, that goodness is not purity, and survival is never clean. The weight of the list. Every night, Arya whispered the names of those who wronged her family. Cersei, the Hound, Melisandre, Polliver, the Mountain. It was a ritual, a reminder, a vow. That list became her lullaby and her curse, keeping her alive, but also chaining her to the ghosts of her past. Over time, as death claimed some of her enemies and mercy claimed others, the list began to fade, but its meaning remained. The list was never really about revenge, it was about control. In a world where she had lost everything, her family, her home, her childhood, the list gave her purpose. It gave her power over a fate that had once left her powerless. And when she finally crossed off the last names, there was no celebration. There was only silence. Because the list wasn't about killing her enemies, it was about surviving them. That silence, that emptiness after vengeance, defines the most haunting truth of Arya's story. Revenge fills the wound only until the wound forgets how to bleed. The wolf and the girl. Arya was never truly alone, though. From the beginning, she was bound by the spirit of the dire wolf, Nymeria. Their separation early in the series was more than physical. It symbolized Arya's split from her innocence. When they finally reunited years later, it was one of the quietest yet most emotional moments in the entire saga. Nymeria had changed, wilder, untamed, commanding her own pack. And when Arya reached out, Nymeria turned away. Arya simply whispered, "That's not you." But the truth beneath those words was deeper. Arya realized that she too was no longer who she once was. Just as Nymeria found freedom in the wild, Arya found her own in detachment. Their bond had evolved beyond loyalty. It became a reflection. Both were wanderers now. Both were creatures who couldn't return to the world that made them. That scene, brief as it was, summarized Arya's entire arc more beautifully than any battle could. It wasn't about reunion, it was about recognition. They had both survived by becoming something the world could no longer control. The face of courage. In a realm ruled by warriors and kings, courage was often defined by blood spilled and wars won. But Arya's courage was quieter, colder, more intimate. She didn't command soldiers. She didn't rule lands. She didn't carry banners. Her battles were fought in silence, behind masks, in shadows, in her own mind. When she walked through the Red Keep's burning streets as Daenerys' fire consumed the city, she witnessed the same horror that had defined her childhood. The difference was that now she understood it. She saw what happens when vengeance becomes justice's reflection, when the line between right and wrong is erased in flame. And for the first time, Arya chose not to kill. That decision, more than any blade or battle, defined her growth. She learned that not every monster needs to be slain. Some are meant to be left behind. It was in restraint, not violence, that Arya proved she was more than an assassin. She was something rarer, a survivor who remembered mercy. The North in Game of Thrones was never just a place. It was a state of being. Cold, relentless, and unforgiving. It shaped those who belonged to it. For Arya Stark, the North wasn't only her home, it was her identity carved in ice. From the beginning, the Starks embodied the virtues of endurance and integrity, yet Arya redefined those traits in her own way. She didn't uphold honor like her father, or lead through wisdom like her brother. Her strength lay in her ability to adapt without surrendering her soul. Every time she crossed a border, from Winterfell to King's Landing, from Westeros to Braavos, the North stayed with her. It whispered in her defiance, burned in her resolve, and hardened her heart without freezing it. She carried the winter within her, not as a burden, but as armor. She was proof that the North was more than just the land. It was the spirit that refused to kneel. The girl who saw beyond power. In a world where everyone fought for the Iron Throne, Arya Stark was the rare soul who didn't care for it at all. Her disinterest in politics, crowns, and recognition made her strangely pure in a realm corrupted by ambition. While others sought to rule, Arya sought to understand. Her journey was not about rising, it was about awakening. She saw the ugliness behind glory, the futility behind vengeance, and the emptiness behind power. After seeing men burn cities for crowns and betray blood for titles, Arya's decision to walk away was not escapism, it was enlightenment. She had become everything the Game of Thrones could never contain, a free spirit, untamed and unowned. That's why her ending wasn't exile, it was liberation. By sailing west of Westeros, she didn't abandon the story, she transcended it. She became the one thing Westeros rarely allowed its people to be, free. And in doing so, she became the embodiment of a truth that echoed through her father's words. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Arya survived, not because she stayed within the pack, but because she learned what it meant to carry the pack within her. The death of fear. Fear defined Arya's childhood. She feared losing her family, feared death, feared being forgotten. But every fear she ever had was stripped from her, one loss at a time. When she joined the Faceless Men, she was taught to kill without hesitation, but more importantly, to live without fear. That lesson found its ultimate expression the night she faced death itself. When Melisandre reminded her, "What do we say to the god of death?" and she whispered, "Not today," it wasn't just a callback, it was her life's mantra distilled into 2 words. Arya had faced monsters in armor, shadows with no face, and kings who commanded death, and each time she refused to bow. That defiance wasn't arrogance, it was hope, a quiet, stubborn hope that life could still matter, even in a world where it meant so little. Her courage was not the absence of fear, it was the ability to walk through it, blade in hand, heart steady, eyes open. She became death's reflection, not its servant, not its victim, but its equal. Beyond the mask. Arya's entire existence was built on disguise, but behind every face she wore, there was a deeper truth. Her story wasn't about losing herself, it was about understanding that identity is fluid. We wear masks every day, for safety, for survival, for belonging. Arya simply wore hers literally. But the brilliance of her arc lies in what those masks taught her, that identity is not defined by what others see, but by what we choose to be when no one is watching. Even after she mastered the art of becoming anyone, she chose to remain herself. That decision, simple yet profound, separated her from every god, assassin, and ruler she encountered. She had learned to disappear, but chose instead to exist. That is what made her more human than any hero, and more powerful than any king. A new kind of hero. Traditional heroes in fantasy stories are chosen by destiny. They wield legendary swords, carry noble blood, or fulfill ancient prophecies. Arya Stark was none of those things. She wasn't chosen, she wasn't foretold, she wasn't even expected to survive. And that is precisely what made her story revolutionary. Her strength didn't come from divine gifts or royal lineage. It came from pain, from the streets she starved on, the friends she lost, the monsters she outlived. Every wound became wisdom. Every scar became strength. She wasn't the hero Westeros wanted. She was the hero reality creates when dreams die. She redefined what it means to be powerful. Her power was quiet, invisible, and deeply personal. It wasn't about commanding others. It was about mastering herself. In a universe obsessed with destiny, she was the anomaly, a reminder that you don't have to be chosen to matter. You just have to endure. The echo she left behind. Even after the series ended, Arya's spirit lingers in the hearts of those who watched her grow. She became a symbol for every soul who refused to accept the world as it is, for every person who fought back when fate demanded silence. Her story taught that survival is not a weakness, that compassion and brutality can coexist, and that sometimes the smallest flame burns longest in the darkest night. Arya Stark may have left Westeros, but the echoes of her footsteps remain. In every cold wind that sweeps through Winterfell, in every whisper that says, "Not today." She was never a queen. She was never a ruler. She was something far rarer, a survivor who changed the shape of her world simply by refusing to die. The legacy of a blade. There are characters who live within the story, and there are those who live beyond it, echoes that ripple through culture, shaping how we see strength, justice, and survival. Arya Stark belongs to that second kind. She is not just a creation of fiction, she is a mirror to reality, to every person who has ever fought silently against the impossible. When Game of Thrones began, Arya was the curious child sitting at the edge of her family's feast, dismissed by lords and laughed at by soldiers. She had no title to protect her, no prophecy to guide her, no father's name that could shield her from the cruelty of men. But that was the point. She wasn't born into greatness, she earned it. By the time her journey ended, Arya had carved her own legend, not through power or politics, but through perseverance. And in doing so, she dismantled one of the oldest myths in storytelling, that heroes must be chosen. Arya was not chosen by fate, she chose herself. That act of self-definition became her legacy. A new kind of feminine strength. Fantasy fiction has long been dominated by male heroes, warriors, kings, knights, and saviors chosen by destiny. Even when women appeared as heroes, they often mirrored those same archetypes, wielding swords like men or being noble because of divine purpose. Arya Stark broke that mold. Her strength was never about imitation. It was transformation. She didn't reject her femininity, she redefined it. Her courage was not loud. Her power wasn't derived from seduction or politics or beauty. It came from grit, the raw, unfiltered will to survive when no one expected her to. She didn't fight for love or for thrones or even for vengeance in the end. She fought for the right to be herself. That is what made her revolutionary. Arya's existence changed the idea of what a strong female character could be. She wasn't flawless. She wasn't soft-spoken or symbolic. She was messy, angry, scared, compassionate, and dangerous. A human being who didn't need permission to evolve. Her story said to every woman, every outcast, every person told they were not enough, you can become anything. The power of refusal. Perhaps Arya's most defining act wasn't killing the Night King or avenging her family. It was saying no. No to the life expected of her. No to the destiny chosen for her. No to the cage the world tried to put her in. When Gendry asked her to stay and be his lady, Arya smiled softly and refused. "That's not me," she said. The same line she once used for her wolf, Nymeria. That single line became a statement of independence, echoing across every fan's heart, because it wasn't just about refusing a man, it was about refusing to become someone else's idea of who she should be. In a world that constantly demanded obedience, Arya's greatest act of rebellion was self-definition. Every time she refused to kneel, every time she rejected a title, she reclaimed her freedom, piece by piece, until there was nothing left anyone could take from her. The philosophy of survival. Underneath Arya's story lies a quiet, powerful philosophy. Survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about remembering who you are while doing it. Every hardship she endured, hunger, loss, loneliness, tested her ability to hold on to her humanity. Where others became consumed by vengeance, Arya learned to live alongside it. She didn't seek peace by denying violence. She found peace by accepting it as part of who she was. That's why, even after her revenge was complete, she didn't collapse under guilt or turn bitter. She carried her ghosts, but they no longer defined her. She was not at war with her darkness. She had made peace with it. This duality is what makes Arya timeless. She shows that you can be both the sword and the mercy, both the hunter and the protector. She is not perfection, she is balance. And in that balance lies her quiet power, the ability to exist fully, fiercely, unapologetically in a world that demanded silence. The unseen journey. When Arya sailed west at the end of the series, many wondered where she was headed. But the beauty of that ending lies in its mystery. It wasn't about the destination, it was about the freedom to go. For years, her life had been dictated by revenge, war, and death. Her voyage beyond Westeros symbolized something larger, the eternal search for meaning after trauma. It's a question every survivor faces. What comes after the fight? Arya's journey westward wasn't a new adventure. It was her first step toward healing. In every wave that carried her ship, there was the echo of her father's words, the warmth of her siblings' love, and the quiet truth she had earned through blood and sacrifice that she was alive, truly alive, and finally free to decide what that meant. That's why her ending feels right. It doesn't promise comfort or glory, it promises choice. For a girl who spent her life being forced to adapt to others' worlds, now she would finally create her own. The face that changed a generation. Arya Stark didn't just change Westeros, she changed us. She changed how we see courage, how we define strength, and how we tell stories. Her face, half shadow and half light, became the symbol of a generation raised on both fantasy and realism. A generation that doesn't believe in chosen heroes